Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're looking at a political development that is nothing short of breathtaking in its cynicism and scale. A supposedly left-wing government implementing the most radical asylum policy shift in modern history. And I'm talking about the Labour government in the UK, led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and the complete historic reversal of humanitarian principles being driven by his Home Secretary. And my strong personal view is that this is not a responsible policy adjustment, as it's done in a lot of countries in some ways. It is an act of political betrayal, a calculated surrender to the rhetoric of the far right, carried out by a party that has lost its moral compass in a panicked pursuit of poll numbers. And this historic turn is the government's desperate nuclear option response to the political power of the populist party Reform UK, which is currently leading the polls by a margin of 15 percentage points. And the result is a brutal, comprehensive overhaul of immigration and asylum policy that is designed to be intentionally cruel, and its consequences will be felt far beyond the UK shores. You know, I talked about this last week already, but we still need to talk about that again. The architect of this radical shift is the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who has quickly become one of the most consequential and controversial politicians in the UK. And the irony of her personal story is almost unbearable. She is the daughter of Pakistani immigrants who arrived in the country illegally during the more open immigration era of the 1960s. And yet, this Labour politician, who represents an ethnically mixed constituency, now openly jokes about being more right-wing than her conservative audiences, effectively using her own background as a shield against accusations of racism in her policies. And her stated goal is to radically sort through the tangle of laws around asylum to stop people from illegally reaching the UK's shores and to favour more qualified applicants in immigration. She fears that the sheer volume and overload of the asylum system will lead to voter anger that could break the country apart, a narrative lifted directly from the populist playbook there. The new measures are stunning in their deliberate severity and are clearly designed to maximize deterrence and minimize humanity. Mahmood aims to abolish the current golden ticket for asylum seekers, the right to free choice of location and family reunification. In its place, she proposes a draconian waiting period. Those who enter the country illegally will have to wait 20 years before they can even apply for permanent settlement. Would she have wanted that for her parents? And furthermore, the right to stay will become strictly dependent on learning English and avoiding criminal convictions. Okay, in that point, I'm with her. But that's just one of the points. And while the latter sounds reasonable, tying asylum rights to punitive language requirements and an extended 2-decade period of insecurity is designed to create a hostile environment that makes true integration impossible and keeps a vulnerable population in perpetual limbo. You rather should fix your system and, yes, I'm going to say this, deport people who have no right to state instead of leaving them in a limbo for 20 years. And this approach is heavily influenced by Denmark, as I said in the last video, a supposedly social democratic country that has also adopted an aggressively restricted asylum policy to appease populist fears. And the UK is now effectively becoming the laboratory for the European asylum solution, where centre-left parties see no option but to shift dramatically rightward on immigration. And Mahmood doesn't appear to be concerned with post-colonial guilt and is actively using her position to take an incredibly hard line. She is threatening a general visa ban on 3 African nations, with Congo, Namibia and Angola, should they refuse to accept the return of criminals and undocumented immigrants. And the political strategy behind this is transparent. The Starmer government believes the only way to counter the surging power of Nigel Farage and Reform UK is to disprove the voters' impression that the asylum system has failed. The boats crossing the channel, with over 39,000 arrivals this year alone, have become a devastating symbol of failed border control for many Britons. And the irony is that this panic is not entirely self-generated. The situation for the UK has been aggravated by the stricter border controls and rejections put in place by other European governments, which funnel more migrants towards the UK's shores. And Mahmood, with her solid social democratic Labour roots but a deep socially conservative streak, is positioned to enact these changes precisely because she stands in opposition to the liberal left intelligentsia, who traditionally form the core of the Labour Party and tend to downplay migration problems. And this ideological conflict is why the government is now facing protests from its own Labour MPs, who are condemning the cruelty of the proposed changes, with the head of the Refugee Council lamenting, "That's not who we are." And the most dangerous aspect of this shift is the legal and constitutional fallout. The Labour government, while wisely seeking to avoid a second Brexit by staying in the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, is planning a radical reinterpretation of key articles within it. They want to severely constrain the interpretation of the right to family life and other clauses that delay the deportation of criminals or visa overstayers. However, as a former Supreme Court justice has noted, this path could force the UK either defy the European Court of Human Rights or prepare to leave the convention entirely, which could constitute a second Brexit from European institutions, and an institution that was formed by Britain as one member. And the government is gambling that it can weaken human rights protections just enough to satisfy the populist demands without incurring the full constitutional cost of leaving the ECHR. And this is a high-stakes, ethically bankrupt gamble. And furthermore, the practical effectiveness of these draconian rules is highly questionable. It is unclear if the message of new severity will even reach the people smugglers, and some experts fear that in the short term, the rules could actually cause a surge in channel crossings and more deaths as desperate people rush to enter before the new, harsher regime takes effect. And the government's primary motivation is survival. Mahmoud is convinced that the cohesion and social peace across the entire country, along with Labour's chances for re-election, depend on this crackdown. It's a profound tragedy that a major centre-left party has concluded that the only way to govern is to abandon its moral convictions and embrace the very policies that will inflict suffering on the most vulnerable, all to placate an electorate that's terrified by the manufactured chaos of the populist right. And for those who are watching for a longer time, you know my stance on that. I am a conservative, not a British one. I wouldn't want to be a British one at the moment. Anyway. And I do support a tougher stance on illegal migration. I often enough here talked about the differences between asylum seekers, war refugees, and economic migrants, and how to deal with all three different groups and what to do with illegal economic migrants. And in my country, there were some changes that I'm supporting since the new government took over. But this populist stance is what makes everything so problematic. And this often hits the wrong people. The people with proper basis for asylum need to be treated as that. And what the government is doing right now is quite the opposite. And if you want to see another video right now, you hear still the man flu going on. The next one is right here in the end screen.